So the present seems quite real and solid to us, particularly what is happening in the present for us. So just survey your feelings now. Some of them may be feelings about your personal situation, but some may be about society. So after the election, fear, anger, distrust, anxiety about the future, confusion, and all those emotions are very deeply felt and they seem quite real. And the external situation that provokes them also seems so solid and real, like it's going to last forever. But let's zoom out for a little bit. And while today in one way seems so solid and important, when we compare one day to our entire lifetime, it's actually quite short. And when we think in 100 years, which really isn't a long period of time, considering, all the history we study in school, in 100 years, none of us are going to be alive. We'll all be reborn, or have been reborn in other realms, other places, with different kinds of identities, but still with the feeling I. Now, in 100 years, we may have some hope that maybe your children are still alive, things about your life, stories are still passed on, work that you did is still noted in journals or in family get-togethers or in scrapbooks or in boxes full of memorabilia that's passed down from one generation to the next. So that may still be around in 100 years, but we won't be. And we won't have any satisfaction of knowing that our memory still remains 100 years from now, because we'll have been reborn in a totally different situation. We won't identify with who we are this lifetime in 100 years, even though all that stuff may still be here. And then after a few thousand years, or even 1,000 years, all of our mementos, everything from our life, all our certificates and awards and photos, all that surely would have been discarded. And maybe after a few thousand years, even this whole planet won't be here. Maybe just because of natural change and degradation, maybe because of human-made problems. But at some time or another in the vast span of time, this planet will surely evaporate in one way. It won't exist anymore. And even after some more thousands of years, the sun will also have burnt out and won't exist anymore. New things will come into existence, but everything indicative of planet Earth and what's happening today in America, November 11th, 2016. All of that will be long forgotten. We'll have taken many, many rebirths. Up and down in samsara, hopefully up, but we're not sure. And so from the vantage point of several thousand or even millions of years from now, today will seem rather insignificant. And so will our problems of today. So given that, why let our mind feel despair and hopelessness or anger or whatever disturbing emotion we feel? Because from the perspective of many years in the future, feeling negative emotions today is not going to benefit. It's only going to create destructive karma that we'll experience the result of. And by letting our mind go into that kind of turbulence, we'll probably incite other people's minds to be full of disturbing emotions, and they too will create destructive karma that will ripen in their suffering. So from the viewpoint of many thousands of years in the future, why spend our time today doing that? And from that viewpoint, what's really going to matter is the karma that we've created, the imprints of the Dharma we've put in our mind, the understandings and maybe even realizations that we've gained. When we look ahead to future lives and future societies, really it's our virtue and non-virtue, our integration of the Dharma, that is going to be the important thing in all those years in the future. So when is it that we create this good karma? When is it that we plant the seeds of the Buddhist teachings on our mind stream? When is it that we influence others in a positive direction? Here we have to come back to today, because this is the time to do it. The present is the only time we ever have to practice. So transforming our mind, creating what the causes for not only good societies, but liberation, full awakening, all that has to take place in the present, in each successive moment that we're alive. And so seeing that, let's have a strong determination today to be compassionate, to be kind, to develop our wisdom, and to contribute to the welfare of other living beings, as well as to progress on the path to full awakening ourselves. And in that light of the importance of practicing in this very moment, if little bumps in the road happen, let's not get derailed. Let's keep our mind focused on what's important in the long term. So in this way, we take care of the long term, and we also take care of today. In 1,000 years, nobody will even remember Donald Trump's presidency. I'm sure that would make him very upset. But it's the truth, because time continues and our self-centered minds' achievements don't. Okay, so we're on page 148. So we'll start on another of the refutations. We talked about the refutation, the 7-point refutation, which boils down to things either being one, the person and aggregates being either one and the same, or being totally separate. And then we covered yesterday the 6 elements are not the self. And today we'll move into the refutation of the 4 extremes of arising. Sometimes they translate this as the 4 extremes of production, but the Tibetan word actually means arising, not production, And the refutation focuses on the result that's arising. Yeah, it's focused more on the result than the cause that's producing. But how does the result come into being? How does the result arise? So here we're analyzing the relationship between the cause and the result. Okay, but it's more from the results viewpoint. Okay, so when composing the Madhyamaka Karikas, Nagarjuna relied on reasonings in the early sutras, drawing out their implications in a way that no one had previously done. So this is his speciality. He obviously, like I said yesterday, was very well learned in the early sutras, which overlap with the Pali Suttas. But the way he read them, he revealed meanings that other contemporaries had not. So based on the Prajnaparamita Sutras, the self that is negated is inherent existence, and selfless is an attribute of phenomena, not just of persons. So prior to that, most people thought selflessness was basically of the person. You realize the not self, that none of the aggregates were the person. What Nagarjuna did, he was saying, it's not just the person, it's all phenomena don't have some kind of inherent essence. So in this way, he really redefined the word self, and it became the object of negation. Okay, so the terms inherent existence, or svabhava, selflessness of phenomena and selflessness of phenomena are not found in the Pali Suttas. They appear later on, first in the Abhidharma text, where their meanings evolved and changed over time. Nagarjuna refutes one meaning of that Svabhava had come to assume, which was self-existence or inherent existence. And he says this in the first verse of his treatise of the Karikas, this verse which is very, very famous. Nothing ever at any time, anywhere, arises from itself, from other, from both, itself and other, or without a cause. So, if you study in the great monasteries, you spend months, years on this verse. Okay, there's a lot in it. So this fourfold refutation, things not being produced by self, others, both, or causelessly, okay, has antecedents in the Buddha's refutation of arising from self, other, both, and causelessly in the Pali Suttas. For example, the naked ascetic Kassapa asked the Buddha, so here, the naked ascetic, remember I was saying that all these non-Buddhists would come and question the Buddha about different things, or he would go out and stop with and talk with different ascetics and Brahmins. So here's a good example. Okay, so they had these naked ascetics, who wandered around naked, and many of them. And then you had the matted hair ascetics that had, matted hair and what is it? Dreadlocks. Yes, yeah. So it's not a new style. Yeah. And then you had the Brahmins who were all prim and proper. So he talked to all of them. So Kassapa, this naked ascetic, asked the Buddha if suffering were created by self, another, both self and another, or fortuitously, in other words, randomly or causelessly. To which the Buddha replied no to each. Then Kassapa asked if there was no dukkha, because if it's not produced by those four ways, then maybe dukkha doesn't exist, which I think he knew the answer to that already, but he asked. Or if he also asked if the Buddha did not know or see dukkha. Again, the Buddha replied to the negative. Confused, Kassapa asked for clarification, and the Buddha explained. Okay. So this is what the Buddha said. If one thinks the one who acts is the same as the one who experiences the result, then one asserts with reference to one existing from the beginning. Dukkha is created by oneself. When one asserts thus, this amounts to eternalism. So what he's saying here is, if somebody thinks that the person who acts right now is the same person who experiences the result, in other words, it's an inherently existent person now who experience and an inherently existent person later, so that they're exactly the same, because remember, if things inherently exist, they can't change. Okay. So is the person who creates the karma the person who experiences the result in the next life? Are they inherently the same, exactly the same person? No. Why not? Impermanent. Yep, they changed. They changed. Yeah. The person who went to school when you were little, who reaps the result of using their knowledge now as an adult, is it exactly the same person, those two? No. Why not?
Changing moment by moment. We're impermanent phenomena.
Yeah, we're impermanent. We changed. We may say in a loose, conventional way, oh, I'm the same person as I was, because we have the same name, because there's the continuity of body, the continuity of mind. But here we're not talking in the conventional way. The Buddha's talking about an inherently existent self, because that's what this guy is thinking of. Okay, the one that creates the cause, the one that experiences the result, exactly the same. They haven't changed in any aspect at all. Impossible. Okay, so if you assert that, that's the meaning of saying dukkha is created by oneself. Okay, and if you assert that, that amounts to eternalism, to grasping at inherent existence. Okay, so that's one wrong conception. If the person who created the cause and the one that experienced the result were exactly the same, then the person who experienced the result would have to exist at the time of the person who created the cause, because they're exactly the same. Can the present self and the future self exist at the same time? No. Okay, but that's the implication if they were exactly the same person, an inherently existent person. Okay. But Kassapa, the Buddha continues, if one thinks the one who acts is one, the one who experiences the result is another, then one asserts, with reference to one stricken by feeling, dukkha is created by another. When one asserts thus, this amounts to annihilation. So here, based on the same idea of inherently existent people, if you think, okay, Joe here, who created the cause, and Ethel here, who experienced the result, they're both inherently existent, but when Joe died, he completely ceased. There was no continuum of existence for him. Okay, because with inherently existent things, there's no cause and effect. So when Joe died, not only his body ceased, but the continuity of mind ceased. All the karma got obliterated. And the whole thing stopped. But Ethel, who experiencing the result, arose completely without cause and is a totally different person. Because she's also inherently existent, so she could arise without cause. So Joe and Ethel are totally completely different people. There's no continuity between them. But if you assert, okay, the one who acts, Joe, and the one who experiences the result, Ethel, then with reference to one stricken by feeling, who's Ethel, because Joe messed up a bit, then, dukkha is created by another, then Ethel's sitting there, with her toothache, saying, how come I'm suffering? My suffering was created by a totally different person, some outside force, something external. Okay? So if that were the case, then there would be no link between causes and results. And you could create a cause and no result ever would come from it. And whatever people did experience would come out of nowhere. Or it would be caused by something that was other than it. Here in the second alternative. It's caused by something other than it. Maybe God, maybe the other person who's your enemy, but some other force is the cause of my suffering. Okay? So no link between the me who created the cause and the me who's experiencing the result. So if you think like that, that's the extreme of nihilism or annihilation, which means that you think that the person gets annihilated at the time of death, and that the karma, that causal energy just ceases, Okay, without veering towards either of these extremes, the Tathagata teaches the Dhamma by the middle. So he's saying we're not going to this extreme, we're not going to that extreme. I think implicit is we're not going to both of those extremes. Okay, so the Tathagata teaches the Dharma by the middle. With ignorance as condition, formative actions arise. If you're familiar with the 12 links of dependent origination that describe how we get born in samsara, it's from ignorance, formative actions arise. From formative actions, consciousness arises. From consciousness, name and form arises, and so on, up through, after you have a name and form, then you have the 6 sense sources, contact, feeling, craving, clinging, renewed existence, rebirth, and then aging and death. Okay, so he's saying here, that the way the Buddha explained things, starting with ignorance, going through, creating the cause, getting reborn, experiencing all the things in life, and then eventually aging and dying, that all of that is a causal process. And each step of it depends on the previous step, the previous link. Okay? So here the passage is abbreviated, okay, because it says the remainder of the 12 links are listed, with each conditioning the arising of the next. Such is the origin of this whole mass of dukkha. But with the remainderless fading away and cessation of ignorance comes cessation of formative actions, then cessation of consciousness, cessation of name and form, cessation of the 6 sense sources, all the way up to cessation of aging and death. Okay, such is the cessation of this whole mass of dukkha. So what the Buddha is saying in this quotation is, if you think that the person who creates the cause and the one who experiences the result is the same, that's not the correct view. If you think those two people are totally different, that's not the correct view. If you think that both of them, both alternatives exist at the same time, then you have the problems of both, so that's not the case. And if you think that things just happen fortuitously, that can't happen either. So how do things happen? They happen as dependent arisings. One thing producing the next. This produced by that, by that, by that. Okay? And so, this theme keeps coming up again and again and again in the teachings. So how karma is transmitted from one lifetime to the next, and the relationship between the person creating the cause and the person experiencing the result have been topics of discussion for centuries. Okay, so you can tell already this is not an easy topic. The first alternative, the person who creates the cause of dukkha, is identical to the person who experiences the result, is eternalism, for it requires there to be a permanent self continuing through many lifetimes, who is both the agent of the action and the experiencer of the result. However, a permanent self cannot act as a cause for something else, because something that's permanent cannot change, and becoming a cause for something else involves change. The second alternative, dukkha is created by another, is annihilation. Here, someone, okay, so there's two alternatives here. Here, someone who believes in rebirth thinks there is no continuity of the person. The creator of the cause ceases completely at death. Many people believe that nowadays. Yeah? Okay, this person believes in rebirth, but somehow they think that the person who exists now ceases at the time of death. And someone new who is totally unrelated is born. Okay, so yeah, I believe in rebirth. Yeah, so this is a very confused view if you analyze it. I believe in rebirth, but when I die, I go totally out of existence, and I have no connection with the person who arises afterwards. And I have also no connection to the person who arose, who existed before me. So why should I have to experience the results of that person's blunders? Yeah, the person before me and I are two different things. And the person who comes after me, totally separate person. They're not going to experience the results of what I do. Okay. So can you see how confused that view is? It believes in causality, but then it turns around and negates causality. Okay. So here, someone who believes in rebirth thinks there's no continuity of the person. The creator of the cause ceases completely at death, and someone new who is totally unrelated is born. Then, someone who does not accept rebirth thinks an external agent or omnipotent creator determines his suffering and happiness. So this is another version of dukkha arising from other. There's another external agent, or there's an external creator, or somebody else who creates or determines my suffering and happiness. So in this case, the agent, the one who's causing the suffering or happiness, and the one who's experiencing the result would be totally other and unrelated. Okay? If the agent and experiencer were totally unrelated, a relationship between a cause and its effect would not exist. Since everything would equally be unrelated to the result, anything could produce anything. Okay? So if there's an unrelated cause, like an external creator or manager of the universe, who creates the cause for my suffering, and we're both inherently existent, then, this one is completely unrelated to me, and yet it still causes my suffering. In the same way, the clock is totally unrelated to me, so it too should be able to cause my suffering and happiness. Does the clock create the cause for your suffering and happiness? Does it create the karma? The action? No. Okay. Or, any of you people could create the cause for my suffering and happiness. Either karmically or right now in this moment because you're not doing what I want you to do. So you're the cause of my suffering. Okay? Well, that's why we spend a lot of time blaming other people, don't we? The third alternative, dukkha is caused by both self and others, would be thinking, for example, a creator created me and the potentials for my action, which would be arising from other, but I act and experience the results of my actions arising from self. Okay, so there you have the best of both deals, yeah? Yeah, the creator created me and created the potential for my actions, but I'm the one who creates the actions and reaps the results. Sounds kind of plausible, doesn't it? Yeah, but the problem is that Arising from self, we negated. Arising from others, we negated. So how can two things that don't work produce something that does work? It's like the thing we had yesterday, all these oranges put together cannot become an apple. Okay. So people at the fourth alternative, that there is no cause or condition for our experience, is another version of the view of annihilation. Okay. If results were random and causeless, farmers would not plant seeds to reap crops, and students would not go to school to get an education. Yeah, because anything you do could not produce a result. So then why do anything? Yeah. Then why even try and practice the path? Because practicing the path produces no result at all. Yeah. However, everything that functions arises dependent on its own causes. So here, this whole thing of causality, dependent existence, the Buddha comes back to it again and again and again as the correct view. People adhere to one or the other of these four alternatives based on conceiving a real self to exist. When all four are disproven, one must give up that wrong view. Okay. The Buddha expounds the view of the middle way, free from eternalism and annihilation. Okay. Causes produce their corresponding results. When an effect arises, its cause has ceased. Okay. This dukkha is not produced by a permanent cause or by someone completely distinct from the one experiencing the result. Dukkha is not predestined, nor does it happen haphazardly. The Buddha traces the evolution of dukkha and samsara by teaching the 12 links of dependent arising, which comes in two chapters ahead, or one chapter ahead. Similarly, he traces the cessation of dukkha to the eradication of each link in this causal chain. Okay, so here's some principles about causality. Yeah, anything that functions is produced by a cause. It can't arise out of nowhere. Okay, the cause has to be concordant with the result, or the result has to be concordant with the cause. In other words, you can't plant chili peppers and get roses. Yeah, you can't act in harmful ways and experience happiness in the long term. So there's a concordant relationship between the cause and result. Yeah. Then also, when the result arises, the cause must have ceased. The cause and effect cannot exist at the same time. Yeah, because for the cause has the energy to produce the result, but when the result comes into being, that cause no longer exists. Okay, if the cause and the result existed at the same time, yeah, then the result could exist without the cause producing it. So you've just obliterated the idea of causality. It means you could be highly educated without going to school. Yeah, you could know, rocket science without having studied. Yeah. And it would also mean if the cause didn't go out of existence when the result arose, then the cause would still be there. So if the cause did produce the result, it would keep producing the result again and again and again and again, because the cause would never go out of existence. So that doesn't make any sense either. Okay, so the cause ceases when the result arrives. arises, okay? The cause also cannot be permanent. It must be impermanent, because producing something involves change. Yeah, the cause must change to bring a result. So it can't be a permanent cause. And it can't be a cause that's unrelated to the result, because then anything could produce anything. And again, you've destroyed causality. Yeah. We could plant weeds and grow vegetables. Yeah. Okay. Then more things about causality. Dukkha is not predestined. Okay, now you might think, oh, well, if there's a continuity between the person who creates the cause and the person who experiences the result, then once this person creates the cause, that suffering is etched in stone, and this person here, who doesn't even exist yet, is doomed, fated, predestined to experience the result, whether they want to or not. No, that doesn't work either. When we plant a garden, it isn't just the seed that makes the plant grow. Planting a seed is no assurance that you're going to get a plant, because the ground needs to be fertilized. You need the appropriate amount of water, too much or too little, and the seed won't grow. Yeah, you can't have stones and asphalt on top of your seed. That would prevent it from growing. The temperature has to be the right temperature for the seed to grow. Okay, so it isn't that a cause, there's a concordance between the cause and the effect. Yeah, virtue always creates happiness, but there's also other conditions that come in there. And if those other conditions are lacking, the result doesn't come, or the result could be of all sorts of different varieties. Okay, so virtue will produce happiness, but whether it produces the happiness of chocolate cake or the happiness of, a good relationship or the happiness of awakening, that can vary according to what happens to that causal energy between now and then, and that is influenced by all the other conditions surrounding it. Okay? So we all know, if you're a gardener, if you give your plant, you plant, a daisy seed, but if you give just a little bit of water, you'll maybe get a sprout, and then it's going to die because there's not enough water. Yeah, if you give it too much water, the seed may rot. You won't get any daisy at all. If you give it the right amount of water, it might grow, but then if the temperature turns really hot, it's going to die again. Okay? So, all the conditions influence exactly how that seed ripens. So it's the same when we create the seeds for happiness or the seeds for suffering, the karmic seeds. Yeah, exactly, the specific ways they arise are not predestined. It depends on many, many other factors and exactly how those factors come together. So it's a very, very complex system of causality, yeah, which brings us, it's the thing of the butterfly in Singapore flapping its wings, and then what is it that happens in America as a result? A hurricane? Yeah, so it's that kind of thing, there's so many causes and conditions that influence things. Okay. So dukkha is not predestined, nor does it happen haphazardly. Suffering doesn't just happen haphazardly. Yeah, there's always got to be a cause. It's not just like, like when they drop the little ping pong balls, and they, wherever they go, it's haphazard somewhere, It's not like that. Yeah, there's a definite causal process. We may not know all the causes and conditions that are present, but it's certainly not random. So the Buddha traces the evolution of dukkha and samsara by teaching the 12 links of dependent arising. So, again, dependent arising, causes and conditions. Yeah. And see, if we have a really good understanding of this, if you meditate a lot on causal dependence in this way, and impermanence and how things change due to causes, it really helps to understand emptiness, because you see that causality cannot function if things are inherently existent. And it also helps, when you understand emptiness, to establish that conventional existence still works, although things are empty. So having a good foundation in causal dependence is very, very helpful in our mind. Okay? And it's very helpful to encourage us to keep good ethical conduct too. The Buddha did not explicitly state in the suttas what kind of real self he was refuting. A permanent, unitary, independent self, or a self-sufficient, substantially existent person, or inherently existent person. So what the suttas mean to us will depend on what type of real self we aim to disprove. So it's very interesting, yeah? The object of negation may be different, but the reasonings used to refute all the objects of negation are the same. Okay? So whether, maybe some people at the time of the Buddha, they were focused on refuting a permanent, partless, independent self that the non-Buddhists believed in. Those refutations that the Buddha used also work as refutations of a substantially existent self and of an inherently existent self. Yeah, because all of those wrong conceptions of self are opposite to dependent arising. Yeah, so once you get something, you start talking about dependence, yeah, whether it's causal dependence or mutual dependence or any kind of dependence, you're going to be able to negate all those if you identify the object of negation, So, or put it this way, better to put it this way, according to what you identify as the object of negation, that's what you'll be able to negate by using that reasoning. As soon as you identify a different level of the object of negation, you can go back and use the same reasoning to refute it. But you're aware of a different type of object of negation that's your target. Okay. So the Buddha explains to the wanderer Timbaraku that pleasure and pain do not arise from self, other, both, or causelessly. So, remember, this is the same kind of stuff that Nagarjuna is talking about in the Karikas later on. So the Buddha says to Timbaraku, if one thinks the feeling and the one who feels it are the same, Okay? So happiness and the person who feels happiness are the same. Or pain and the person who experiences the pain are the same. In other words, they're completely identical, union, oneness. Okay? If you think like that, then one asserts with reference to one existing from the beginning, pleasure and pain are created by oneself. I do not speak thus. Okay, so here he's talking not only about causality and Timbaraku's wrong idea of causality, but also he's talking about, apparently Timbaraku is confusing the agent and the object, feeling and the feeler. Okay, the hitter, the baseball hitter, and the ball. Okay? Are the guy who hits the baseball and the ball the same thing, identical thing? No. When you experience happiness or suffering, is the person identical to the happiness? Is it identical to the suffering? Do you become suffering? No, you're still a person, aren't you? Does your suffering become a person? No, it's still a feeling. Okay, so we shouldn't confuse these things. But here there's that confusion. Okay, and so it boils down to thinking then, pleasure and pain are created by myself. Yeah, I created the cause, and I am the result. Okay. The Buddha said, I do not speak thus. But Timbaraku, if one thinks the feeling is one over here, and the one who feels it is another, then one asserts with reference to one stricken by feeling, pleasure and pain are created by another. So again, the feeling and the feeler are two separate things. Yeah. And in addition, the cause and the result are two separate things. Yeah. So you're saying there's no link between them. Yeah. There's no link between the cause of the feeling and the person, or the person who creates the cause and the person who experiences. And there's an irreparable gulf between the feeling and you. Okay, so suffering, your feeling, your experience of suffering is there, and you are here. Is that correct? No. Okay. You as the sufferer, or you as the elated, and the feeling of suffering or elation, there's a dependent relationship there. They aren't two inherently different, totally irreconcilable things. Okay. Neither do I speak thus. Without veering towards either of these extremes, the Tathagata teaches the Dharma by the middle. With ignorance as condition, formative action arises, and so on, as above. Such is the origin of this whole mass of dukkha. But with the remainderless fading away and cessation of ignorance comes cessation of formative actions and the cessation of the rest of the links. Such is the cessation of this whole mass of dukkha. So Timbaraku is confused regarding not only cause and effect, but also agent and object. The first position, that a feeling and the person feeling it are the same, is the extreme of eternalism, because we think the feeling is created by feeling itself. Okay? In this case, the resultant feeling would exist in the past before it arises. Okay? Because if feeling and the feeler are exactly the one, then, you have feeling here, then feeling must have created it. Yeah, so feeling creates feeling and the result exists at the same time. The second position, that a feeling is one thing and the person feeling it is another, is annihilation. We think the feeling was created by another unrelated person. That is, one person created the cause and another experiences the result. This would mean that the continuity of the person who created the cause was annihilated at death, and a totally different person who experiences the resultant feeling, was born. Okay, also not correct. If pleasure and pain were created by both ourselves and another, the faults of both these positions would accrue. And if they arose randomly by neither oneself nor another, all causality would collapse. The Buddha does not negate the existence of pleasure and pain. So in all this discussion about how pleasure and pain are arising, the Buddha does not negate their existence. Their existence is our conventional experience. Okay. The Buddha does not negate the existence of pleasure and pain. He teaches that it arises dependently. Feelings arise from impermanent causes that produce impermanent results that are concordant with those causes. Okay, so it comes back to causality again. Assuming the existence of a real self, here's another monk, the monk Bhumija, asked Shariputra. Shariputra was Buddha's disciple who was foremost in wisdom. He asked Shariputra how pleasure and pain arise from karma. Does it arise from itself, another, both, or causelessly? Shariputra replies that the Buddha said pleasure and pain are dependently arisen. Specifically, they depend on contact. So, in the causal link, before feeling is the link of contact, because you have to have contact with an object for the experience or feeling of that from that object to arise. Specifically, they depend on contact. Here again, dependent arising is used to refute mistaken notions of self and causality. This discussion is intimately related to our lives. Is the person who in the past created the causes for my life today the same person who experiences the results today? Is our suffering others' fault? If it's produced by others, then it's the fault of others. Is suffering punishment from a supreme being? If there's production from an inherently existent other, like a supreme being, the supreme being is the cause of our suffering, then our suffering could be a punishment for displeasing that supreme being. Do happiness and misery occur randomly, out of nowhere? You have health problems out of nowhere. These questions are food for thought on our spiritual journey, and how we answer them will affect how we live our lives. So how we answer these questions will affect whether we believe in the law of karma and its effects, and that will affect how good or how well we keep ethical conduct. Okay. If you believe in a supreme being who is causing our happiness and suffering, then the true dukkha may be the same, but the cause of the true dukkha is this supreme being. Then how do you eradicate the the cause of dukkha. Either you eradicate the Supreme Being who's permanent, you can't do that, or you have to please them somehow by worship and this and that and the other thing. So you live your life in a totally different way if you think that pleasing an external being is the cause for your happiness. Okay. Now, here's a quote from Buddhaghosa. So remember, he's a Pali commentator, very, very famous one. Listen to what he says. This sounds like Madhyamaka to me. There is no doer of a deed, meaning there's no inherently existent doer of a deed. There's no doer of a deed, or one who reaps the deed's result. Phenomena alone flow on. No other view than this is correct. No inherently existent cause, no inherently existent result, just causal dependence. Okay? And so, while karma and result thus causally maintain their round, a seed and a tree succeed in turn. That word always has puzzled me, I say succeed when I speak, but when I read that word, I never know how to pronounce it, because there should be a G in it. Succeed. Yeah. It should be S-U-G, seed, C-E-D-E. Okay. Okay, as seed and trees succeed in turn, no first beginning can be shown. Yeah, there's beginningless causality. A monastic disciple of the Buddha with direct knowledge of this fact can penetrate this deep and subtle empty conditionality. So there he's putting emptiness and conditionality together. Okay? Conditionality does not exist on its own. Yeah? Emptiness also is not some inherently existent reality. Yeah? Emptiness and conditionality are bound to each other. You can't have one without having the other. Madhyamikas begin their refutation. Now we're switching to the Madhyamaka perspective. They begin their refutation of the four extremes of arising by identifying the object of negation. Tsongkhapa says that grasping the object of negation, here's some definitions again, is to take both cause and effect as not merely nominally imputed, but as objects that are the bases of nominal imputation, grasped as inherently existent, produced, and producer. Okay? So the object of negation, when you're talking about causality, you take cause and effect not as merely nominally imputed, imputed by term and concept as related to each other, but the objects that are the basis of the nominal imputation, the seed and the sprout, the virtuous action and the happiness, so those things which actually are the basis of which are nominally imputed, those are grasped as inherently existent, produced and producer. Okay, so essentially, things that exist by being nominally imputed, by term and concept, our mind believes them to be inherently existent, cause and effect, produced and producer. Okay, so here are the causes, such as seeds and karma, and their effects, sprouts, and suffering or happiness, are held to have their own inherent essence, independent of all other factors, including nominal imputation. So they become self-enclosed phenomena. Yeah, things that exist nominally, that exist causally, they're interrelated with a whole web of things. They are affected by all sorts of other factors. They're in a constantly changing flow and process, arising and ceasing. Things that are inherently existent because they don't depend on other factors are stagnant, static. They don't change. They're self-enclosed. They don't relate to anything else. A tight little self-enclosed ball. Okay. If things existed inherently, they would have to arise either from self, other, both, or causelessly. There are no other alternatives. These four positions were held by various schools in ancient India. Let's examine each in turn. Okay, and so then it goes into the refutation from the Madhyamaka view. Let's pause here before we get into that refutation, because that's going to last a while, and see if there's any questions. Yeah, I know, that's what, when I started reading this, I was going, whoa, yeah. But then it seems like, people may read things differently, and it seems like the commentators also pulled out certain points and emphasized things in certain ways. And so some things were emphasized more than others. But, when you really search in these things, it's like astounding, or at least I found it so. It could be that first you have that view and then you think a totally different person is born. Or it could be the other way around, that because people don't like thinking I'm experiencing the result of somebody else who wasn't me, or they like thinking somehow my suffering is not my fault, I didn't do anything. And so then they have that feeling that makes them, feel better. And then they have that, they invent that conceptuality that supports that feeling. What you were saying is that first you have the philosophy, then you have that belief that the two people are different. Right, yeah. It could work that way, that first the person has the philosophy, and then they say that the people in the two lives are different. Or it could be first, because you said it comes as a consequence of it. So this is the cause, this is the result. Or I think it could be the other way around too for some people. That first people say, yeah, I believe in rebirth, but I don't like the idea of their, I think there's two different people, because I'm an independent American who picks myself up by my own bootstraps. And then they go back that way and believe in that philosophy. Okay, it's talked a little bit about in the introduction. His Holiness feels that he has a better, the question was, why did he want to write this book at this time? His Holiness feels that he has better relationship with people of other religions than he does with other Buddhist traditions. Because he goes to all these interfaith gatherings, they're all very wonderful, and he has more contact and better relations with many of these people than with people from other Buddhist traditions who he doesn't see so often, And this is historically, because people lived in different countries, they had different languages, and it's very interesting. If you look throughout society in this way, like the Catholics and the Protestants are, all sorts of stuff going on between them. But sometimes it's easier for one of them to have better relationships with somebody who's completely different than them. Yeah? This is how human beings are. If you're really close to me, but you differ a little, that difference is more important than if we're just two distinct things. Because if we're two distinct things, I can respect you because you're over there in your part of the world doing your stuff, and I can say nice things about you because it's not going to influence me over here doing my stuff. But if you live next door, when your lawn isn't mowed, it really bugs me. Yeah. But when the person's lawn in Germany isn't mowed, I don't care. So it's kind of like that. Yeah. So he really would like to have not only himself personally, but he would like to see amongst all the Buddhist traditions, more contact and discussion about all sorts of different things. Central University of Tibetan Studies in Sarnath, they've had some Vinaya conferences with Buddhists from different traditions. They're trying to do more things. But like I mentioned before, so often when it's international Buddhist stuff, it becomes politicized. Because China says you can't invite the Tibetans because Tibet is part of China, so we're only going to send the Tibetans that are this and that, and then they try and become organizations that pass rules and laws and stuff like that. So he really wants, I think, just more harmony and discussion and between different Buddhists so that they can act together on the basic Buddhist principles of compassion, empathy, forgiveness, peace, things like that, because these basic principles are so needed in society. Yeah. So in order for us to act together, we have to know about each other. Yeah. And also, if we learn something about each other, first of all, it reduces all these old prejudices that have been passed down for centuries, which really disrupt things. And, because you learn in whatever branch you're studying in, these other people, It's like one time, this was many years ago, and it was in North Carolina, actually. I gave a Dharma, I was invited by a Galu center, so I gave some Dharma talks there. And then a Kargyu center also invited me to give a Dharma talk. After the Dharma talk at the Kargyu center, somebody came up to me and said, "Wow, you could not have given that talk unless you meditated." Okay. And this is the standard stereotype. The Galus only study, they never meditate. The Kargyus only meditate, they don't study. Neither of those are true. But this is what she had heard. So she was so surprised that I meditated. Yeah? So these are the kinds of things that we really need to get rid of. Okay? And I can also say from my own experience, in doing the research for this book, I learned so much that helped my own practice. Yeah. And so I think this kind of cross-tradition dialogue and study is very, very helpful for our own practice. Okay, so different people do say things in different ways. Okay, so if cause and effect, first comes the cause, then comes the effect. But you're saying if the effect doesn't exist without the cause, okay, yeah. So, or the cause doesn't exist without the effect. Or the cause doesn't exist without the effect. When we talk about causality, first there's the cause, then there's the result. it is linear. Okay, that's causal dependence. When you get to mutual dependence, which is another type of dependence, then cause and effect do depend on each other. You can't have one without the other, because the seed cannot become a cause unless there's the possibility of the effect. Doesn't mean the effect has to exist at that time, but there has to be the possibility of the effect for the seed to become a cause. Yeah. So in mutual dependence, not only does the effect, the sprout doesn't become a result unless, you have a cause. So the cause is posited in relationship to the effect, and the effect is posited in relationship to the cause. Okay. But that doesn't mean that the cause needs to exist as a fully blown result at this very moment. Okay, because if it existed as the result in this moment, the sprout would already be here and the seed would simultaneously be here. Yeah, and the baby would be here, and the mother who was a baby would also be here at the same time. Yeah, which that's not how it is. Okay, so if we could know all the different causes and conditions, could we then say that things were predetermined? Okay, hypothetically, yeah. This is a little bit of a difficult question because they say that the Buddha does know all the causes and conditions, so he knows the future. But we still have free choice. Okay? Because usually free choice and predetermination, or you have one or you have the other. And in Buddhism, you don't have either one of them totally. Because things aren't totally predetermined, because they depend on causes and conditions. But we don't have total free choice either, because we depend on what came before us. I don't have the choice to start speaking Chinese right now. Yeah. So could you say, why not? I don't have that free choice. Why not? Because I haven't created the causes to speak Chinese right now. Okay. So we still can make decisions, and our actions and our thoughts are quite important. Yeah, so it's not predetermination, and it's not totally free will either. It's, again, dependency. And causes and conditions can always change. Yeah, okay. And fading away. I know that I would go, remainderless fading away? It sounds like it evaporates by itself. Remainderless means that you've cut the root of samsara. Okay, so there's no remainder of ignorance. When there's no remainder of ignorance, then there's no remainder of the afflictions of the karma and so forth. And then fading away, this I haven't read in a book, but this is my idea of what fading away means, is that it means you get rid of the ignorance gradually. Right. Okay. So sharing the thing that from this teaching, what you began to do is appreciate whoever you were in the previous lives, even though you don't know all those people, and feel but knowing whoever they were, they created the causes for you to be who you are today. And that gives you a lot of energy to create the causes for whoever is going to come after you, who will be a continuity of you. It's not a totally inherently existent, unrelated person, nor were those people who created the causes. Okay, but when you have this feeling of causality, then you realize, wow, I created a whole lot of good karma in previous lives to be where I am now. And then you look like you did, you can see in your life, and I don't know about others, but I can see in my life certain points where I could have gone this way or I could have gone this way. And it would have brought really, really different results. So why did I go this way instead of going this way? Some kind of causal energy that enabled me to wind up here meeting the Buddhist teachings. Yeah. And so this is an accident. It is not accident. So given that, I need to create more causes to make sure that in the future, not only this life, but future lives, to go in the kind of direction I want to go in. Yeah. Yeah. Because you realize it isn't happenstance. Yeah. And it depends on the causes we have created.